That was the start button. This is Windows 10. Yeah, rock on. Okay, my name is Jan Nelson. I'm with Microsoft Corporation in the Operating Systems Group. I mentioned that a little earlier today. I was privileged enough to take this photo when I first arrived here the next morning. Richard Ishida suggested that I go to a window in a building, and I looked out and saw this fabulous sight. What a beautiful city. So I'm here to talk about XLIFF 2.0 and the Multilingual App Toolkit. But what I really want to do, oops, I didn't really want to do that. There we go. Is I really want to go ahead and take us through a few things around how it looks to a software developer while I'm talking to a room on the topic of localization or localizers. Okay? Just going to click. There we go. So the overview here is around a toolkit that I'm one of the co-creators of called the Multilingual App Toolkit. We'll call it MAT for short today. MAT is a free plugin. It goes into any SKU of Visual Studio, including the Express SKU, which is also free. It has a common localization workflow to it, common to the extent that it doesn't matter what you're programming in, whether it's C#, C++, you know, you choose. Developers have a lot of different targets in how they're developing. The workflow remains constant so that the dev doesn't have to think about it in different ways when they're working across different projects. This is also true, and I'm not going to show today the cross-platform support, but with higher versions of Visual Studio and the Xamarin plugin, which requires beyond a fee and it needs a professional to run in, Matt will help you with your Android, iOS, and Windows Mobile cross-platform localization as well as universal apps and Windows Store apps and so on. We do support XLIFF, and that's one of the things that I will talk about. We worked on the TC for XLIFF 2.0, and this is something that's interesting because we had been on the TC for XLIFF 1.0 a long time ago. And at that time, the company was in a very different place. Paige had mentioned earlier how different the company today is from back in the 90s. And in the early 2000s even, and in the mid-2000s, we were still, or the 2005, in that era, we were still not ready to address localization standards. We were very much focused on the fact that Microsoft had grown very rapidly in different silos. Okay, so there was Office, and there was Windows, and there was Developer Division, and there was Server, and so on. And each one had its own challenge in going global. And so there were a lot of different processes that were built internally, each running its own agenda, and there wasn't really a lot of thought about common standards at that point in time. We're very different today. We have integration also with Microsoft Translator. Within the Multilingual App Toolkit, at any level, including the Express SKU, you have a full unlimited license to translator resources. It doesn't matter how much you use it. That's not true outside the toolkit. There are fees depending upon how many translation units you go through per month, where you could have a professional license, but when you're using the toolkit, the license is unlimited. We also have an extensibility model. I will show you that we have our language portal API. Paige's team owns the terminology studio and translation memories that Microsoft creates when we localize our products, and we provide those through that API as well. So the developers have access to that within this toolkit. And I also have implemented a provider for the Taos API just to show third-party support is quite easy. We do provide pseudo-translation. Since Windows Vista, we have had pseudo as a language that isn't presented as a language preference, but if you know how to search for it, you can find it. And so if you're working in Windows resources, you can very easily create pseudo markup or pseudo translations as well. And we have a translation editor that allows you to be able to work with individuals who don't have Visual Studio, don't want Visual Studio, but do have linguistic capabilities. So when you enable MAT, you enable it on the toolbar. This is just kind of giving you an idea of what you'll see here in just a minute. You can add translation languages from the .NET language list, which is a formidable list. You can generate translations, and you can run and test it. So as a developer, it doesn't take many steps or many clicks to get to the point where you have a localized application on your desktop running. So let's see if we can take a look here. Actually, I'll start with this. Let's see, not that one. This is a simple app. It's a universal app, a new class of apps that we're talking about at Build. This one is very simple. It is a demonstration of handwriting recognition. I don't know if my handwriting is recognizable. Oh yeah, it's not switching. Duplicate. There we go. And we're not quite getting the entire screen here. So I don't know how well that's going to work. We don't have the resolution, I guess. Okay, well, I wrote Hello World, and you can see down here it actually recognizes it. So it's just a very simple app. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and get into Visual Studio here. I'm going to stop that app. I'm going to go ahead and I've downloaded, I installed Multilingual App Toolkit. I'm going to enable it. The application is now enabled. I'm going to go ahead and add a language. And we'll add French. So if we take a look at what we have here on this list, you'll see that I have French France. You'll also see that I have 3 icons here that are decorating that language. Each one of those is one of the translation services that I've implemented. The first one is the Taos API, the second one is the Microsoft Language Portal, and the third one is Microsoft Translator. The way you set up, we have a little translator XML file and a management file, and the order of precedence from top to bottom is how you get those results back. If you have one service that you prefer over another one, what we do is we take the highest match and give that to the dev. When we're picking, if there's a 100% match, we'll give that one over something that has a different weighting. We're not responsible for the quality statement of those translation services. We depend on that to be handed to us. So we'll go ahead and choose French. Okay, now the moment I've done that, if you look over here, you'll see we now have a multilingual resources folder with an XLIFF file. So this is the beginning of where you're starting to see that we do support a standard. You'll also see that we've created a res.devu file in the same name. And this is one of the issues that devs have, and the reason why it's a formidable challenge for developers to work with multilingual applications is that they need to create these folders for each language, and then they have to manage them. If they have a string change or correction, they have to remember to put it everywhere. We do that for them so they can focus on their code, which really frees up a lot of time and effort, makes the bar a little bit lower. Okay, so the next thing I want to do then is when I'm looking at this, right now this is not, it's an empty skeleton. It has no content in it. We have to go ahead and run a build to make that happen, or we can just go ahead and generate. So if we go back here, I can just say generate languages. This service might be running a little slow because we're running off of a shared Wi-Fi and there's a lot of phones and machines in this building that are also using the same bandwidth. So it might take us 2 or 3 minutes to actually get a handful of resources through this pipe. But you know, while we're talking about that, I wanted to just talk a little bit about standards in Microsoft. We support over 150 standards entities, organizations, and are active in over 400 working groups of one form or another as a company. So when we talk about standards here, and I'm talking about XLIFF, this is one very, very, very focused aspect of how Microsoft represents itself into the world as a company that's very serious about standards. It is moving. While it's doing that, I'm also going to change the language that we're going to see. Okay, so I have some languages installed here, but what I want to do is, this is the Windows language preferences, is I want to see things in French if they're available. And we've gotten a little bit further. It's better than Rome. We are going out and talking to 3 different services online. There's only a handful of translations to be made, so it should have gone really, really fast, but we're getting there. We've talked about quality here today in translations. We all know, I believe everybody in this room would be aware that machines don't necessarily have the same level of quality as human beings. And so, as a developer, it's important that I understand that as well. In some cases, developers may believe that the quality of the translation that they get from a machine is adequate. In a world of apps, that may be true, that may not be true. It depends upon what domain they're in, whether or not they're doing a very simple little game app that is good enough. If it's a line of business app for an enterprise, clearly that wouldn't be true. And they need to have an interaction with human beings as well. We're waiting for this thing to build. The build here is a little bit slower than it should be. This is a technical preview of Windows 10 with Developer 15 running on it with the Multilingual App Toolkit version 4.0, technical preview running on top of that with technical preview of Universal App SDK. So the stack here of preview software is pretty deep, but it seems to be working fairly well today. Arl, I've got a few seconds left. This build takes about 2 minutes right now. Okay. And so we now have it in French. This is a machine-translated French. Obviously, like I said, you could see some issues with this, that you may not care for the French quality. and that would be fine. As a developer, I can go ahead and say, well, what I really want to do then is I really want to go ahead and import. So if I've sent things out, I can go get them back. In this particular case, I could go to my handback where I had that XLIFF file that I had sent out and bring it back in, and it consumes it. If I've made changes, and this was a challenge that I had heard earlier about resources have to be frozen. As a developer, that isn't the way I work. I continue to work and work and work on my stuff. And so when stuff comes back in, there may be a mismatch between this string and what it was and what it is. We go ahead and manage that too to give the developer just an information that says, hey, you know what, that string has changed. Do you want to overwrite it, yes or no? They can save the translation, they can put it in place. We have a bit of a state engine sitting there that allows the developer to make some choices. The other thing that I want to show you before I kind of wrap up here is that we also have the ability to export. And I'd mentioned about that. And in here, we can either export to a file folder location. I had that one out on OneDrive, or a mail recipient. And if we do a mail recipient, we can go ahead and do it as XLIFF 1.2 or XLIFF 2.0. I wanted to be able to run MAT 4.0 on the XLIFF 2.0 object model that we do have working inside Microsoft. Its performance isn't quite ready to ship to third-party devs yet. We're still working on that. So to still bring the standard forward and help drive adoption, we are able to round-trip XLIFF 2.0. So if you have other implementations, we do support that now. And as we get our object model up to speed so that we can ship it, it will go into this toolkit as well, as quickly as possible. Okay? So with that, a few resources here on the slide deck where you can get more information about the toolkit itself. You'll see that there is a multilingual at Microsoft.com. That email goes to Cameron Laram, my co-inventor, myself. There are three of us, actually, that listen to the social and email feedback, and we answer every question, every inquiry. There have been some questions about, so how successful has this been? Do you have any success stories? I can tell you that there was a German company who decided they wanted to try and go into China recently, and they had never done anything like this. This is a company that sells software for a fair amount of money per license, and they tried MAT out as a prototype and felt that they could use it. That caused them to then take a look at rewriting their software so that it was localizable, and then running it through MAT, and then using human translation, doing the round tripping to get the quality they wanted. It took them 3 weeks from the time they started until the time they shipped. And for them, that was stunning for the first time ever. They now are shipping in China. Naturally, they can scale out from here. They've learned their lessons very quickly. And they said that without MAT, they would not have shipped into China. So, you know, that was a really nice positive feedback that we got back from them. Okay? So that's it. I have other resource slides behind this one. We don't need to see those. They're just how you globalize and localize and a few other things. Okay? Thank you.